Spring has officially sprung, which means a lot of people get huge bursts of motivation. That motivation, it kind of puts you on the top of the world and tells you, this time I'm definitely gonna learn a language. I bought this course, I have this app, whatever it is, and I'm gonna study every single day, and this time I will definitely be successful in my language learning. I'm definitely gonna get fluent in Spanish or Italian or French or whatever it is. You ride that motivation high for as long as it lasts, but then eventually you burn out again. And that feeling is like a complete 180 from that high of motivation. You just feel really terrible and just really down. And so you end up giving up on your language learning again. Ergo, we have our problem that motivation and consistency are not compatible. And so we as language learners need to stop trying to rely on motivation to keep us consistent in our language learning. And I know this because I've been there over and over and over and over again. Every single time I had that rush of motivation or something cleared up in my life and I felt like I had the superpower and I could accomplish whatever it is I wanted to accomplish, that's when I started up my language learning again, and some vague matter of time later, I would burn out again. And I had this feeling really deep inside. Every single time I would get that high of motivation, I would tell myself that this time it would really work, even though like really deep inside, I knew that it wasn't going to work. I just didn't know why. I wasn't able to recognize the cycle of motivation, overcommitment, burnout, and quitting that I'm gonna tell you about in this video. I'm going to show you why motivation keeps failing you and what you should do instead if you actually want to stay consistent in your language learning. Okay, so first things first, why doesn't that motivation last? Why do we get sucked into the cycle that ultimately leaves us feeling really, really bad? The problem is that when we are looking for consistency in our language learning, we need to look in the literal opposite direction of motivation, because motivation by definition is not consistent. By definition, motivation is something that ebbs and flows. It's an emotion. You can't rely on your emotions. By definition, motivation is inconsistent. So if we try relying on our motivation to keep us consistent, we're just going to be inconsistent. And then thanks to the entire world telling us, you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, we just keep thinking, I am just not trying hard enough. I am lazy, I am procrastinating, when none of that is true. None of that is a problem. You're not lazy, you don't need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and try harder. You need to get out of this cycle that you're stuck in. So we know what not to do, but what do we do instead? First thing you need to do is you need to step back and think about, okay, so I'm feeling really, really motivated. Let me think back to a time that I was really motivated before and I ended up failing. Something ended up going wrong. What was it that went wrong? What did that look like? What did that peak of motivation look like? What did that drop at the end where I just felt terrible look like? And what did everything in between look like? And it may be hard to remember what exactly you felt, because unless you have the habit of journaling or talking to somebody about your everyday emotions, then this is something that we generally don't tend to think about. And that's okay, because acknowledging the problem is the first step. Because when you acknowledge the problem, then you can think the problem isn't me. The problem is the approach that I'm taking and the cycle that I'm stuck in. And when you take the blame off of yourself, it gives you a chance to actually fix the problem instead of just feeling terrible about it. Then once we've acknowledged what the problem is and are open to identifying what the solution is and stop trying to blame ourselves for everything that goes wrong, the next thing to do is to stop chasing that motivation and instead chase some consistency and momentum. What does that mean? What is the difference? So motivation is defined by that huge peak of excitement and emotion, right? It's a peak and you're constantly chasing that peak. It's like a drug. That motivation is like an addiction. It's a dopamine rush. And so you're constantly chasing that, but you can't control it. It's not reliable. It's not consistent. And honestly, the fact of the matter is that motivation, that like huge surge of emotion, it just isn't real, because that motivation is based off of kind of like a theory of a future potential maybe version of yourself. Because that motivation says, wow, I would love to study every single day for a year and at the end of the year be fluent in Italian. So that concept of the future version of you is really exciting, but the version of you now that's real and you're dealing with it every second of every day, it hasn't changed, right? It's still the same. And you're kind of hoping that eventually you'll reach that future version of you. And you're hoping and you're trusting and you're believing in that motivation will get you to the future version of you, but it don't work. Instead, let's go for consistency and momentum. Instead of relying on the consistency of the potential future that may or may not happen and putting all of that weight on you to become that version of you, instead, we're going to use our today version of us to get us excited and motivated and consistent. How do we do that? Well, we choose a language learning strategy that we actually want to do and makes us happy day to day. And that might sound cheesy and maybe a little obvious, but I really want you to think about that. Because the goal of learning a language, it's not to get consistent. Consistent is how you get to the goal. Because I'll bet you that every time you find yourself stuck in this cycle, you're trying to force yourself to do something that you don't enjoy or doesn't fit into your lifestyle or maybe just isn't reasonable for you for any number of different ways. If you're trying to force yourself to use this particular strategy or approach to learn a language, eventually you're using all of that like energy and goodwill of the motivation to just kind of like force it through, and eventually you're gonna hit a barrier, you're gonna hit an obstacle where you're just kind of like stuck. Instead, if we want to be consistent with our language learning long term, we have to use a strategy that by itself is consistent, that we want to do, that is easy for us to do. Because honestly, language learning is hard, but it doesn't have to be nearly as hard as so many of us make it out to be. Because yes, language learning is a challenge, but the challenge should stay in the language learning itself, not the strategy, the resources that we're using. That all should be like easy and enjoyable and fun and like you want to do it. Because if you want to do it, the challenge of the language itself becomes a lot easier. What does that mean? That means finding the right resources for yourself, learning what the actual obstacles are that you're facing, maybe what mindsets are holding you back, like how you're making yourself feel bad, how we're dealing with the obstacles that come up in everyday life, because of course life isn't going to make this easy for us. Now, if that sounds like a lot, I hear you, because honestly it is, but fortunately, you are currently speaking to the one person in the world that knows how to do this. If you are tired of getting yourself stuck in these cycles of excitement and then eventual burnout, I can help you build a language learning strategy that works for you based on your goals, based on your lifestyle, based on your budget, based on your interests, based on all sorts of things that are personalized and individualized for you. And it starts with a free consultation call, link below in the description, to see if my course is what will finally get you unstuck in your language learning. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, so it's just one of those polyglots who has this best way to learn a language, and they swear that thousands of people have learned a language using their course, so buy now. I hear you, because I've been in that position. I've done the fancy courses. I have done the Duolingo streaks. I have done the commitments to learning a language for an hour every single day. And then when those things didn't work out, or I got bored, or just something came up in life, I blamed myself. I knew there was something wrong. I just didn't know what that something was to fix it. Because here's the thing. I didn't just try a small handful of language learning apps, get here on YouTube, and decide to tell you which app is right, which app is wrong. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I don't work like that. And if you've used my language app search, you know for a fact that I don't work like that. If you've been following me for a while, and if you've used my language app search, then you know that I have spent many hours, many years researching different language apps, testing and comparing between them, working with other language learners that aren't me, working really hard to connect the dots between all the different ways to learn a language, all the tools available, what people are struggling with, and how to just like quickly get people from where they are now to where they want to be. I know what works long term because I know how to personalize a language learning strategy for any individual human. I'm not worried about what's trending. I'm not worried about whatever app is trying to pay me a lot of money to talk about them. I'm worried about your needs, your goals, your struggles, and what resources and mindsets that you need to untangle the mess of the cycle that you're stuck in. Because I'm fully aware that pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is a complete oxymoron and doesn't mean anything. Like, if you've never thought about it, seriously, like picture you're standing up, you're wearing boots, you have like your shoes are tied, and you hold your straps, your shoelaces, and you pull them up. You try and pull them up. It's an oxymoron. Like, historically, it's meant to be an oxymoron. So it really just goes to show you that blaming yourself isn't something that is going to help you in any way. You don't need a productivity hack, and you don't need the best app, and you don't need to be a different person. What you need is a language learning strategy that actually fits your brain instead of trying to fit yourself into all of these different language apps. And if you're at all familiar with my content, then you know that's exactly what I help people build. Remember, the problem isn't you. There's not something that's inherently wrong with you. You're not lazy. The issue is you are stuck in a cycle that is designed to fail. So just imagine how things would be different for you in your language learning if you stopped relying on that rush of motivation and instead had a system and a language learning strategy that just works for you, because that's how it's designed. So if you are ready to finally break that cycle of motivation to burnout, click the link below in the description to schedule a free consultation with yours truly so that I can help you find a language learning strategy that works for you. And of course, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video all about how to learn languages in various lighting, because I don't know what's been going on with this video. This is what happens when I try to record a video during sunset. Bye.